welcome everyone. Welcome on this live session for the MOOC Biobanking. Okay, maybe Adriana, you can start now. Okay, let's go.
Thank you. Thank you, Clementine. So hello, everyone. My name is Adriana Chiarelli. I'm your community manager, and I'm very pleased to welcome you today on board for this Q&A live session. I will introduce briefly myself. So I'm working as a project manager at the Biological Research Center on Institut Pasteur in Paris, France. My background is as biotechnologist, and then afterwards I did a PhD in microbiology here at Institut Pasteur. And after that, I joined the Biological Research Center. And I'm working on several projects, and among my tasks, there's also the community management for this MOOC Biobanking edition 2023. Well, as you can see, there are other speakers here, so I will give the floor now to, well, Remy, maybe Remy Artus can present himself.
Okay, thank you, Adriana. So I'm Remy Artus. I'm collection manager at ICAReD Biobank. It's the unit dedicated to human biospecimen here in Pasteur in Paris. So I have a license degree in biology and a master degree in biobank management. And I work in this field since 5 years. Emmanuel,
thank you.
To continue.
Thank you.
Your microphone is off, Emmanuel.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Emmanuel Roux, and I'm the head of ICAReD Biobank. I have an engineering background in biology and a master's degree in biobank management. I have been working in biobanks for almost 20 years, especially in the human model.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Dominique, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. I'm Dominique Clermont, head of the collection of Institut Pasteur, the CIP. This BRC is dedicated to mainly bacteria, more than 26,000 strains in our collection. And we have also some viruses. And in the future, fungi will be also available to the distribution.
Wonderful. Raquel?
Yes, hello to everyone. I'm glad to welcome all the participants of this MOOC on biobanking. I am Raquel Hurtado-Ortiz. I am the coordinator of this MOOC. And I have my bachelor degree was in microbiology, and then the master and PhD degree in immunology. And I am the head of the National Collection of Cultures of Microorganisms that is recognized as international authority, deposit authority, and we have biological material associated to patent procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Raquel. We also had Muriel Gouger, but she's not here. I can't see her. Probably there are some problems. Well, maybe we can move on, and then when she's back to the session, I will give her a few minutes to introduce herself. So the purpose of this session is to be able to answer at least most of your questions and doubts, to address all these doubts related to the biobanking field and specifically to the biobanking MOOC. We hope you are enjoying this MOOC. We thought to proceed in this way. We will go through the questions that we already received because some of you already put some questions in when they registered to the live session. After that, there will be space, of course, for other questions that you might have. Please feel free to ask any kind of question in the session Q&A that you have here in the at the bottom. Normally you should see this section, so you can type your questions, and we will either address and answer your questions in the chat, or we will take them live. And also, in case there isn't enough time, please keep in mind that we also have a forum in the MOOC where you can write your question, and we will try to address your questions as well. And on that note, we could maybe go through these questions that I mentioned. So we can start maybe with the first question that participants had, which is about the software development. So the first question was, how can the software development sector be used in biobanking? And maybe for this question, I will give the floor to Rémi Artus to give us an answer, to enlighten us.
Thank you, Adriana. So indeed, the software development sector is essential to biobanking. We use on daily basis BIMS. You must know LIMS. BIMS is a biobank version of laboratory information management system. So it's biobank information management system, and it's used every day to track all activities applied on samples during operational process. It's made to record the life of the sample, reception, preparation, preservation, and distribution. And for example, it's necessary to track the transformation of the primary tube into derivatives. So we use BIMS instead of Excel. And many BIMS already exist. Some are for sales, so you can buy it. You can buy a license of BIMS to be used in your biobank, or you can also develop your own, or developed on the base of an open source BIMS. About software development, it's also interesting to know that there is a lot of need in interconnection between software. So it's a good point to have knowledge in software development, but also data analysis. And finally, BIMS can also be used to register equipment, to manage reagents and consumables, inventory management. That's it.
Thank you, Rémi. Well, on this note, there's another question in the chat about FlexLimbs. Indeed, people are asking, so Mariam is asking if it's envisageable to share this very interesting tool in the Pasteur network. She works in the Institut Pasteur of Tunis in the laboratory of virology. Raquel, please.
Yes, I would like to add for this question about FlexLimbs that nowadays there are some institutes that are part of the network that are working with the developers here in Pasteur in order to start using FlexLimbs. So for me, it's possible.
Thank you, Raquel. We can move to the next question. The next question was in French, but I will translate it in English, and it's about the organization and the importance of a biobank. So maybe Rémi, you could continue on.
Sure. So the importance of a biobank is to standardize research from the bottom, from the biospecimen, as it has been proved that almost 70% of research was not reproducible since 2005. And then another paper in 2016 in Nature shows that still 70% of research is not reproducible. So we need to standardize the quality of the samples to make research reproducible. My accent is not perfect, but I hope you understand. And Biobank is organized around the operational process. I mentioned them previously on the previous question. So it's reception, preparation, preservation, and distribution. There is also management process. And you can have a quality, how do you say, like certification to ensure that your organization is running well. So here in Pasteur, we are certified with ISO 9001, and we aim to be accredited to the new ISO 20347.
The new ISO.
387.
So it's 387. Thank you, Remy. Maybe we can move to the third question, which is, well, it will be always Remy giving us a short answer. The third question was about the historical of biobanks. So someone is asking to please have the historical of biobanks. So if you could please, yeah.
We can answer this as the approach of collecting is already a way of biobanking. So collecting, sort, rank, and preserve is the essence of biobanking. So in a way, we can say that cabinet of curiosities could be considered as proto-biobank. You must know that the collection of CIP is since the beginning of the Institut Pasteur, more than 130 years. There is also Carus von Linné, which classified vegetals. And if we go back to nowadays, in early 2000s, there was no biobank, and physicians were collecting samples, but mostly don't have time to manage them. And most of the times, the quality of the samples was not sufficient to produce proper research, because the samples were not managed correctly, as it's a dedicated activity. So there was a need of dedicated organization to manage samples, and that's why biobanks are nowadays very used and very spread worldwide.
Wonderful, thank you, Remy. So we have another question, and this time I will give the floor to Raquel. This question is, what advice for someone who wants to start a biobank of viruses in a low-income country?
Yes, it's a very complex question, but I can give some information about it, because most of the times that in low income countries, you don't have the necessary resources to set up a biobank. So it happens, of course. So in my point of view, it is important to make first a good selection of, in this case, you talk about viruses. So make a good selection of viruses in which you are going to start setting up this biobank. And they must be strategic regarding the interest for public health, because this you can use this as to justify the cost to funding agencies, for example, showing the interest in investing in the country's public health problems. This choice, I mean, the choice of what kind of viruses you are going to start incorporating into a biobank will allow you to focus these resources also on the quality of the samples. Traceability is another important thing to consider when isolating viruses, especially from human samples. It is important to have all the possible information associated with the sample to be able to relate the isolated strain or the variant of a virus with the background of talking about its origin. Because biological resources without the associated information are weakly exploitable or they are not used in an optimal way. You have to also consider the cost model. So there are some guidelines on biobanks that are available for the community. So this can give you an idea in order how to implement, to start establish a biobank. I can, for example, mention one of them, that is the ICAReD best practices recommendations for repositories. So this is a guideline proposed by the International Society of Biological and Environmental Repositories. And this could be useful in order to start implementing that.
Thank you, Raquel. Well, if I may add something on that, because there is another question which is very similar. It's not focused on viruses. It's broader. So how to cope with the fact that there is a high cost associated with implementation of biobanks in low-income countries? Well, indeed, what you said, it's very important to first identify the area of interest, the needs of the biobank. Can also support seeking for funding, specific funding, which can come from global organizations like WHO or other ONGs, or maybe fostering international collaboration with industrial partners, depending on the scope of the biobank. That can for sure help also the search for funding and then reducing the cost associated with setting up a biobank. Okay, well, we can then move on to the next question. So this was in French, but then translated in English. So someone is asking for the cost and biobanking model of plants. I will let Dominique answer this question.
Yes, unfortunately, Institut Pasteur has not plant BRCs. That's why it's difficult to answer your question. But you can get closer to INRAE, which develops plant biobank in closed environments or in open environments like field, greenhouses, etc. For example, you can contact the National Center for Plant Genomic Resources if you are interested. Only in French, for the person who asked the question, vous pouvez contacter l'INRAE en France qui a des biobanques avec des plantes. À l'Institut Pasteur, ce n'est pas notre cœur de métier. Voilà.
Merci. Thank you, Dominique. All right, let's move to the other question. Are there any ethical strategies in biobanking microbial species isolated from human? So if the person is here by any chance and would like to add something to this question, please feel free to write in the chat. I will let Raquel and Remy handle this question.
Yes, because this question have two components. So it's the human, if we talk about human samples, and microbial strains isolated from human samples. So if I can add something regarding the microorganisms, and then I pass I ask Remy to answer the next part.
Personally, I have not understood well the association of ethical and strategy, but my main message is that if you obtain samples from human, you must ensure that you have the consent of the donors or the proof of the consent. Else, you can be in trouble.
Okay, yes. And then if we focus on microbial resources isolated from human samples, I can mention, for example, you are maybe aware of a Nagoya protocol on access and benefit sharing. So this is a protocol, it's an international agreement that seeks to fight against biopiracy and seeks that the countries of origin of genetic resources be beneficiaries of the or the use of these resources. So in this case, to be in compliance with the protocol, the country of origin of the isolated microorganism must be taken into account. And if we talk about microorganisms isolated from human samples, the country of origin of microorganisms isolated from these samples is the country where the microorganism is isolated and not where the sample is collected. So for example, if you collect, you are analyzing, I don't know, feces samples that you isolate in Brazil, you take this sample in France, and here you isolate the microorganism. There is the country of origin is France. So I can add this part as ethical strategy in order to, when we work with these kind of samples.
Thank you, Raquel and Remy. We can move to the other question. So someone is asking what to consider when stocking biohazard and take it for diagnostic. Raquel, would you like to answer?
When stocking biohazard?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that this question is talking about, yeah, when we preserve, for example, pathogen, no human pathogens.
Yes, I guess this is like a little bit the question behind. So what happens when we are stocking?
Yes.
Human pathogens, animal pathogens.
Pathogens. Yeah, because it was not clear at the beginning. But if we, I mean, first of all, if we don't know the type of pathogen that we are going to isolate from a sample, it is important to have, for example, clinical information or other information that allow us to suspect the type of pathogen that we are going to find in this sample. With this information, we have to focus on the management and the storage, preservation of human pathogenic microorganisms. So this, we have to do it according to the biological risk groups. So you know that there are 4 groups if we talk about biorisk groups, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it's a very we can explain a lot of in this question, but you have also some information and guidelines regarding, for example, I will mention biosafety manual of the WHO. In this manual, you can find information about the biorisk management and assessment. For example, biosafety measures, containment. This question was focused on the storage, and that you can find information regarding how to storage these samples of the different biorisk groups. how you can transport the samples. So there are some national, mainly international regulations. So you have, for example, also the guidance on regulations for the transport of infectious substances. And there are other references, such as, for example, the Australia Group Common Control List Handbook. If we talk about, for example, the use of microorganisms as biological weapons or the dual use microorganisms. So we are talking more about biosecurity. But I mean, this is very large also to comment, but I can put in the chat this the information of these guidelines.
Thank you, Raquel. All right, let's move to the other question. So that was in French, but then in English is about storage at -80. Where is the maximum tolerated error? And on what do you base your decision? How do you define it? So maybe we need to address this from the human side and the microbial side. I will thus give the floor to Dominique for the microbial part.
Yes, for me, storage temperatures should be below the threshold temperature for activity of the degradative enzymes of the specimens. And that's why -60 is considered not to allow ensuring stability in frozen strains over a long period of time. That is why we have an EMT of -15 degrees Celsius, which leaves us a small margin, in fact. Is it clear?
For me,
yes.
I will then give the floor to Remy for the human side. In case people have any doubts, they can write in the chat, of course.
So at -80, our maximum allowed deviation for temperature is based on literature, and we try to avoid crystallization of water. And the second state of water is located at -60 or -65. It depends of the biospecimen and of the density of the biospecimen. So we use a maximum allowed deviation of 15 degrees plus or minus -80 degrees.
Perfect. Thank you.
You can check the literature about it.
Thank you, Remy. I will move on to the next question, and this time it will be me trying to answer this question. So how can biobanking course support and contribute to the discovery of the new diseases and prevents the risk of spreading it? Well, biobanks can indeed support scientific and clinical research, and a collection of biological samples and associated data can help us to gain a better understanding on existing and emerging pathogens. And by consequence, attending a biobanking course can can provide you with the basic knowledge and the essential elements and skills to know how to properly handle samples and associated data. Please bear in mind also that biobanks are research support units, which means that we need to bear in mind that biobanks are linked to research because they help also ensuring reproducibility and improving and having better results. Biobanks are also essential, and gaining knowledge through trainings can be important, because biobanks can be, for instance, important for enhancing preparedness plans to handle for outbreak response, thus to develop operational readiness, to enhance resiliencies, to enhance capacities in order to be able to promptly respond to health emergencies. And one example is COVID-19 or any other outbreak, Ebola outbreaks, for instance. And all the biomaterial, for instance, that can be used for diagnostic and for developing therapeutic solutions. So indeed, attending a course can be of importance to learn at least the basics to develop a biobank. I will move to the other question, unless my co-speakers want to add something to what I have just said. Sorry for this noise. If not, I will move to the next question. So the question was, what kind of advice would you like to give to someone who would like to develop a LIMS, basic LIMS? So I will try to answer this question. I don't know if you can hear me because there is this very bad sound. Well, I would say that first of all, if you want to develop a LIMS, you need to identify the needs of the biobank, of the culture collection, of the collection where you want to develop this LIMS. It's important to know how many samples you want to keep track of, so the volume of your biobank, what kind of samples, what kind of information you want to track, because, for instance, if you have a low number of samples, it might be easier to just use an Excel file and to just keep track of this sample. If you want to create a link, for instance, between what you have, so your samples and the service for sending the samples to user, then you need to create something a bit more complex, where you need to have for sure informatic skills, but also tightly interact with biologists in order to address their needs. It's also important to figure out what's the budget you have available, the resources you have available, and the needs of the operational side, so the needs of the team. So I would say constant communication and interaction with the people working daily in the biobank. I don't know if the co-speakers want to add something to what I've just said. No. If not, we can maybe move to the questions we have in the Q&A here. So we have a question from Mariam for Dominique, Clermont.
Mm-hmm.
So could you please explain more the Nagoya protocol? That's the first question.
Nagoya.
That's very broad, I would say. So maybe just the principle of what is it,
Yes.
Nagoya, and yeah.
What can as the head of a collection, we have to know where the strains we have in collection have been collected, in which country, which at what times they have been collected. It's very important because the country where the strains have been collected are the sovereign, I don't know in sovereign.
They are the owners somehow.
They are the owners of the strains.
Yeah.
And if you learn about the Nagoya protocol, you have to refer to the country where the strain has been collected. It's very important. If you want the strain to do some valorization with the strains, it's important to know where the strains have been collected. And if we have this strain in your biobank, you must know this point. It's very important. It's basic, but you have to know that.
So let's say that the Nagoya protocol can bring some constraints in the distribution and the reutilization of biological resources.
Exactly.
So that's why also it's very important to always keep track of some essential information like the origin, the country of origin, so where the resource was isolated. And of course, this is just related to microbial resource.
It's not only isolated, it's collected.
Collected, yeah.
Yes,
collected.
And we need all transfer of the strains need a MTA.
Yeah, indeed, that's the second question. Is MTA mandatory for transfer within the same country?
Yes. Because
within the same country as well. So for instance, you are in France and you want to send
yes, but because we have to trace
keep track of
the transfer of the strains, and we to be sure that the people receiving the strains will not transfer the strain to another a third party. It's very important to know that. That's why we must use MTA even if we are in the same country.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Dominique. Another question is from Elizabeth. It's in French, so maybe we can try to answer in both English and French. She's a student in biology, a PhD, and she would like to know what is the procedure to be followed to create a biobank. Well, first of all, maybe if I can say something, the MOOC can help already to guide you. So indeed, a training can help, as I was saying, to gain the essential knowledge on the key steps and what are the different elements that you need to consider when you want to build a biobank. There are maybe possibilities also of internships. Sometimes in biobanks, we also have this kind of possibility in Institut Pasteur from time to time. So it's always good to talk with people, to communicate, to create a network that can help also to build your expertise and acquire new skills. I don't know if my co-speakers have anything to add.
I would say that you have to think about what you want to preserve in your biobank, which strains, why. And it's very important to choose if you consider the biodiversity of if you are considering another criteria.
Yeah,
other criteria, I don't know.
Indeed. Emmanuel, si tu veux répondre en français à la personne, vu que c'était en français la question.
Merci. Donc, la procédure pour créer une biobanque, en fait, ce n'est pas une simple procédure. C'est-à-dire que c'est tout un ensemble. Pour pouvoir créer une nouvelle biobanque, déjà, il faut analyser l'écosystème. Il faut savoir quels sont les besoins et les attentes des parties intéressées de votre biobanque. C'est ce qui va vous permettre, en fait, d'établir, de commencer à structurer cette biobanque. Et notamment, quand j'entends structurer, c'est envisager les dimensions de vos locaux, les équipements, du personnel nécessaire et surtout de définir votre thématique. La thématique de la biobanque, c'est encore une fois ce qui va faire son essence, pourquoi elle existe. Est-ce que vous voulez faire une biobanque en recherche ou est-ce qu'il va y avoir aussi une balance en diagnostic ou pas? Voilà, il y a plein de détails en fait à analyser en amont de la construction. Une fois que vous avez bien établi le background de votre biobanque, là, effectivement, vous pouvez commencer à réfléchir donc, sur les travaux. Est-ce que vous avez d'abord des locaux à aménager? Parce que qui dit biobanque dit héberger des enceintes thermostatiques, donc des congélateurs, qui vont comment dire, dégager énormément de chaleur, qui vont utiliser beaucoup d'énergie. Donc tout ça, ça se dimensionne. Donc, travaux, d'abord salle de stockage avec des congélateurs, ensuite des locaux pour un laboratoire, parce que encore une fois, une biobanque, ce n'est pas que stocker des échantillons, c'est aussi les réceptionner, les préparer, les transformer, les tracer pour ensuite enfin les stocker et ensuite les mettre à disposition des différents chercheurs. Donc, si je résume un petit peu sur la construction d'une biobanque, c'est un local de stockage dimensionné au regard de vos enceintes et des enceintes dimensionnées au regard de l'activité prévisionnelle. Et enfin, à côté, un laboratoire, encore une fois, dimensionné au regard du nombre d'échantillons que vous souhaitez traiter dans votre biobanque. Voilà. Une chose fondamentale, donc ça, je l'ai mis sur les messages. La chose fondamentale qui va aussi structurer votre biobanque, ça va être votre logiciel. Donc, on en parle effectivement depuis tout à l'heure, un BIMS qui soit correctement adapté à votre activité de biobanque. Mais ça, on pourra revenir à un autre moment si vous voulez. Et enfin, juste pour terminer, et je passe la main, la dernière chose qui peut vous aider aussi pour structurer votre biobanque, c'est la qualité. Donc, il y a des normes, on en a déjà parlé durant le MOOC, donc l'ISO 20387, qui saura vous guider, structurer, donner une colonne vertébrale à votre biobanque. Voilà, et je vais m'arrêter là pour ce MOOC. Merci.
C'était parfait, merci Manu.
Je peux rajouter juste l'aspect distribution. Si vous faites une biobanque, ce qu'on appelle un CRB, il faut pouvoir distribuer les souches, donc avoir une visibilité. Et donc, il faut un site web, il faut pouvoir penser à mettre en place tout en lien avec le logiciel de gestion de la collection, de la base de données. Il faut avoir aussi un site web qui permette d'être visible pour que les gens puissent venir vers vous chercher les ressources.
So to summarize what Dominique said, and Emmanuel said, among the different aspects, there is the quality of the samples, how to store these samples, but also the distribution. If you want to be a biological research center, it's important to gain visibility and to offer visibility to your holdings. And this can be done through outreach, communication strategy, through the website. And ideally, it would be easier to have a connection, a link between your LIMS, your beams, or where you have the associated data, and a direct link with the website that would simplify also the management of the samples and associated data. So let's move to the other question because time is running out. So the question from Ulu is in French, so we will try to address both in French and English. I will try to answer this question. So, quel est le logiciel? What is the best software for a biobank nowadays? There is no best software, I think. I think it depends. I mean, there are different options. You have commercial solutions. You can decide to invest resources, time, energy on developing your own system. There are open access systems, softwares. All depends, as I mentioned earlier, on the needs you have, on the volume of biosamples you have in your collection. It depends especially on the budget available. I would say this is crucial in the choice of the tool you want to use. In what you want, in the sense that if it's just to keep track of your samples, can be easily an Excel file, or if it's a more complex system, it's not easily. I see Remy, but I mean, it depends on different things. But let's say that ideally something that is covering the different needs, so how to send samples, how to keep track of how many stocks you have, for instance, of the different samples. It depends on the needs. I would say. So I would say there is no perfect one, but if my co-speakers want to indicate and make some publicity to certain tools, please go ahead.
Just to mention that Excel files is nice for very small collection, and when you don't have budgets for your biobank or spending time or energy in developing a software. But one thing is very important is that Excel does not allow you to see what has been done by your colleagues. So in a biobank, it's very important to track all activities applied on samples. And Excel don't do that. So you must be aware of that.
Yeah, definitely. You also lose the historical of the different actions. So indeed, if you have less than, I don't know, 500 samples, maybe it can still be done. Still, I think it's complicated. It depends indeed on the volume as well of the biobank.
Not recommend Excel, but
it's not the best option. Let's say that you can start with, but then you need to have in the long term a different approach. All right. Okay. Next question from Monica. It's about what Raquel said on the isolation of strains. It was not clear for me if the sample from Brazil arrives to France and something is isolated from the sample, does the strain belong to France? Like, is that correct?
Yes, yes, I have to, yeah, I would like to clarify this, because if we, this is for microorganisms isolated from samples. So in this case, if it is a human sample, I put an example, the feces sample collected in Brazil, but the sample then is transported to France, and here in France is isolated. So the origin of the microorganism is France, but it's only for that kind of. And when we talk about, for example, other kind of samples, for samples, soil, for example, the origin is the collection site of the soil. That's why Dominique was referring to environmental samples, the seat or the place of collecting. So those are the differences. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Raquel. There is one question. In our biobank, we are planning systems of backup for ultrafreezers. My question is if the backup CO2 injection is prejudicial for samples. I'm not sure I understand the word prejudicial.
Can you repeat? Sorry, Adriana.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure I understand préjudiciable in French. Wait.
Yes, Emmanuel is answering in the
yes,
chat.
Yes. Okay.
Quickly.
Is it bad for the samples? Voilà. So the backup CO2 injection, is it bad for the samples?
Backup system is no longer recommended nowadays because it's very complicated to maintain. Indeed, it is necessary to control the CO2 content in the environment for the protection of people, as well as to weigh the cylinders regularly to ensure that they are always full. This has a cost. Best practices recommend deploying monitoring systems, temperature monitoring software, and dry contact to ensure the backup system. Comment dire, est-ce que tu pourras traduire ensuite, Adriana? En fait, le CO2 dégrade, abîme les enceintes. Le CO2 abîme les congélateurs. Donc c'est vraiment pas.
So the CO2 is not very good because it's really affecting and degrading the freezer. So that's what Emmanuel was trying to say. Okay. So I think we need to wrap up. Maybe we can just focus on the last question. It's in because we would like to challenge you with a very, very small and short quiz survey at the end. So the question is in French. So regarding the setting up of a biobank, why you didn't talk about the organizational perspective, I guess, of the infrastructure? I don't know if I think you can see also this question in the chat from Ellie. En ce qui concerne la mise en place d'une biobanque, pourquoi vous n'avez pas parlé d'une manière organisationnelle l'infrastructure?
Je ne comprends pas vraiment. Qu'est-ce
I'm not sure I understand the question either. So I don't know if, yeah, Rémi, you answered. Yeah, I see that.
Yes, I guess it's about quality approach and how you define your activity around process and management process and operational process. So I think that's it. But I answered Ellie that it could be detailed in a longer course.
Perfect. Okay, we need to wrap up. Are there further resources? Okay, let's wrap up. If you have any other question, you always have the forum of the MOOC. So please don't be shy. Feel free to write all your questions in the forum, and we will try to get back to you as soon as possible with hopefully an answer to your doubts and questions. And maybe, I don't know if it's possible to launch the small poll, Clémentine. Right, okay. So we want to challenge you with this small survey. So we would really appreciate your contribution in that. If you could answer, there are only 6 questions and they are very, very simple. And that's also helpful for us to identify your needs and to better support you in the training in the future, and to better accompany you in this training in biobanking. So normally you should be able to see the survey. If not, please let us know in the chat.
Don't hesitate to ask further questions in the MOOC. And as I mentioned, the video recording will be available hopefully tonight, so you can watch again the webinar, the live session, if you want to.
Okay, well, I think we can finish here. And thank you very much, first of all, to the co-speakers for being here and being helpful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Clémentine. Thank you for the help, the support, and thank you to the team, education team in Institut Pasteur, Leo especially. So thank you, everyone. If you have any other question, feel free, please, again, in the forum. I will say it for the 4th time. Well, see you soon, maybe virtually. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, afternoon, evening. I don't know what time is for everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.